Okay, ich fange ganz kurz in Deutsch an, dann switchen wir ins Englische. Sie haben vielleicht erwartet, dass Martin Staudinger vom Profil hier sein wird, um die Diskussion zu moderieren. Er lässt sich entschuldigen, weil als Auslandschef vom Profil ist er auch für die Geschichte, die gerade in den Niederlanden mit einem Österreicher abläuft, zuständig. Er muss eine längere Geschichte schreiben und wahrscheinlich morgen in der Früh in die Niederlande fahren. Und so habe ich mich bereit erklärt, hier einzuspringen und improvisatorisch praktisch diese Diskussion zu moderieren. Gut, as I said to you, Martin Staudinger apologizes not for being with us today. He unfortunately has a professional obligation in the Netherlands and will be leaving tomorrow in the early morning to conduct a case here. Since we did not find a new moderator in such a short time, I will be taking this responsibility. So we have a little bit to improvise. Two participants who had originally agreed taking part in this discussion also have apologized because they will not come today. Berivan Aslan is ill and Hans Streiter has withdrawn his commitment for the discussion. Due to the fact that the discussion must be conducted in English, artists did not feel the confidence to participate in today's podium. That's why a political representative, Mamo Mirzani, is left from the minister, spokesman for the HPD Austria, which is a Kurdish political party, is present with us today. But before I start as a moderator, I want to start as a gallerist and speak a little bit about my gallery. The gallery is deeply committed to promoting young artists and helping them succeed in the art market. The gallery also genuinely defends women's cause and aims, and at giving voice to young female artists, which is exactly what explains why most of our artists are women. But why did we do this exhibition? Art has more to offer than mere aesthetic pleasure. Art is a product of our time. It always is a reflection of a given socioeconomic and political context. Art invites us to reflect on current issues, to stimulate critical thinking, and it prompts us to take action for the better of society in which we live in. This idea is very well illustrated by Silke Maier-Gamauf and Romana Hagio's installation here in the middle of the gallery, which was originally shown in the Notgalerie in Seestadt Aspern in Vienna. This artwork has been demolished by a leading FPÖ official and therefore was strongly censored. In the exhibition, we document the destruction of the installation, and at the same time, we position ourselves against such censorship. Santiago Sierra's work, entitled Political Prisoners in Contemporary Spain, was censored in 2018 before the opening of the famous Arco art fair in Madrid. And it was in fact the starting point of this exhibition, entitled Censorship and Freedom of Expression. The exhibition house in CO Berlin has shown this work in spring 2019, and from where it was brought to Vienna. This artwork has made possible a collaborate with the Catalan Cultural Association in Vienna for the elaboration of this show. Ari Wachsmuth is also with us, who is an Austrian artist and whose works are exhibited opposite the front door, focuses on documenting the different situations and ordeals that refugees are confronted to at the Bosnia-Croatia border. But there's hardly a work of art that better characterizes the current world political situation than Mirkan Deniz's installation. This is on the back side. The artist is a stateless Kurd who lives in Switzerland. This work was first shown last spring in Basel and was awarded with a prize. Mirkan Deniz has put together this work for our exhibition again. The installation illustrates a Kurdish house that has been destroyed by a Turkish tank. On the back wall, one can see the GPS coordinates where the house was located in Kurdistan. We live in Austria, and despite the fact that message control, fake news, and anticipatory obedience, that is to say voluntary self-censorship, are very much the object of current issues. Freedom of speech has an integral part in the country's identity. That is not the case, of course, for other neighbor countries like Hungary or Poland. Under these conditions today, the participants of our panel discussion can freely and openly discuss the mentioned issues. We are looking forward to your insights. Thank you for your attention. Good. Now we start with the introduction of the discussion. Freedom of speech and opinion is under attack. Who would have thought that we would have to state this in the 21st century, in which we expected the exact contrary? When the internet was invented, we thought that it would end all censorship, because no state, no government, no regime would be able to stop people to express themselves. Now we face a completely different situation. Freedom of speech and opinion is not only under attack, it is also under attack from all sides. Regimes block the net, they arrest critics, they conduct smear campaigns to undermine the credibility of activists and opposition members. On the other hand, freedom of speech is threatened by an excessive form of political correctness and by the aggression of the right-wing trolls as well. How can we react? What can we do against it? What is the role in art in this situation? These are the questions I'd like to discuss with the panel. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce the panel. I will start with Mr. Alfred Bosch. I think it's the right name. He leads the Department of Foreign Affairs, Transparency and Institutional Affairs in the Catalonian government. He is not only a politician, but also historian, journalist and author. He did his doctorate about Nelson Mandela and the civil rights movement in South Africa, and reported as a foreign correspondent from countries like Bosnia, Syria, Mexico and India. He wrote 17 books with a wide range of topics, is founding member of then Catalonian National Assembly, and has still time for his family. So then we have Mirko Mirzani, the spokesman of HDP Österreich. This is a Kurdish party, but you can later on explain more on detail. Then we have Salvador Espada. He represents Unidas, Podemos, Austria, and is an environmental activist. He studied marine biology at the University of Cardiff and was active in the student movement. After finishing his studies, he moved to Austria to do a doctorate about marine germs. We don't know why in Austria. Then we have Gabriel Lansky. I think he's well known. He's a lawyer in Vienna with a wide range of clients. He built one of the biggest law firms in Vienna. Today he joins us as a representative of Reporters Without Borders, which he has supported for a long time, and I think you are a board member. Yes. And on my right side, we have Yvonne Gimpel. She is director of IG Kultur, which represents 703 cultural initiatives in Austria. She served as a General Secretary on the Convention for Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Forms of Expression at the UNESCO and in the Commission EU XXL Film Forum and Festival of European Films. Yvonne is an expert for cultural policy and focuses on an area of diversity, political participation and promotion of art, cultural, beside market mechanisms. Mr. Bosch. When we compare the situation of the Catalans with minorities in other countries, it seems not to be too bad. What is your point of view?
Well, that looks like when they asked Groucho Marx whether he was all right. Somebody met him in the street. They asked him, is it all right if I speak English? Mein Deutsch ist nicht sehr gut. And they asked him, how are you? How are you feeling? And he said, well, it depends. And they asked him, it depends on what? It depends on who you compare me with. And so in that sense, it depends to whom you compare us. Obviously, there's much room for improvement. This exhibit here with pictures of politically victimized people includes one picture here. This one up here, which was the one that motivated censorship in the Arco art fair, which you mentioned, is a picture, clearly a picture of him. We recognize him easily. He's the leader of my party. He was in the Catalan administration. He was the vice president there when the referendum was organized 2 years ago. Immediately after the referendum, him and all the members of government were chased. Some of them went into exile to avoid jail, but himself and others were detained, and they had been kept in a preventive jail for 2 years already, without sentence and without trial. Finally, the verdict came out this week, and all of them, 9 of them, have been condemned to a total of 100 years in jail. For what? For organizing a referendum on the future of Catalonia. Now, you might argue that there's a constitutional difference behind whether that referendum could be held or not, but constitutional differences have always, in the Kingdom of Spain, been solved through arbitration and political dialogue. In this case, no. And he, as others, is accused of a very bizarre and peculiar crime, which is organizing a vote. And that's happening in the 21st century. Now, there's been a big outrage and shock in Catalonia because of these court rulings. And we, as the successors of these people, we believe it's completely unfair. This fellow here, for instance, is 50. He's a good friend of mine. I can testify that he's a good man. He's a Christian. He has very strong values. And he went willingly to declare to the court. And that's when he was snatched. He was imprisoned. He has been sentenced, in his case, to 13 years of jail for that, for organizing that vote 2 years ago. So, well, we do have a problem. We have a further problem when we're not allowed in the Catalan parliament to speak of self-determination. That would take us to court directly. When this sign you see here, yellow sign expressed in laces or in other motifs like what I wear, this has been banned several times, and people are being also chased for that. Some expressions are not allowed, like during elections, talking about political prisoners, which is what we believe him and other people are political prisoners. And you can't use that expression. So let me say, yes, we have political prisoners. Let me say, yes, we have political prisoners. Let me say, yes, we have political prisoners. Let me say it loud and clear. And whatever the Spanish government thinks or the judiciary system thinks, I believe that in the 21st century in Western Europe, we should be entitled to freedom of speech. We should be entitled to the right to vote, especially on highly sensitive political issues, because that's what the vote is for, and that's what democracy is for. So we think that, yes, there's a lot of room for improvement. We're asking for their freedom, just like United Nations is doing through the Working Group on Arbitrary Detentions. And we think that democracy is at stake, we think that civil rights are at stake, and that not only involves Catalonia or the Kingdom of Spain, that will affect the standards of democracy and civil rights in Europe. So as fellow European citizens, I ask people like you to follow the situation, to decide what your personal judgment is. And if you think this is unfair, we also ask you to speak out, like we do when there's problems, and we do it also all the time. There's problems in Kurdistan or Palestine or with refugees. I remind you that we are we're a society which is has believed always in solidarity. The biggest demonstration for welcoming refugees during the Syrian crisis took place in Barcelona, in the capital of Catalonia, a few years ago. So we are sensitive to situations in other places. We only ask you not to take a position on the Catalan Republic, which we think is a good idea. That's something which is up to us to decide. But we do ask you to accompany us to ensure that there's democracy and that civil rights are respected in Spain. Yes, we think those are universal values, and we have to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I would switch to Gabriel Lansky. You are here as a representative of Reporters Without Borders. And do you see a deterioration of free speech due to the rise of right-wing populism in Europe?
Yes, there. let me maybe make some initial statements which I feel I should make. First of all, I want to make clear that I am not in favor of secessionist movement in Europe. It's not my preferred way of the European Union and of member states in our union. I believe in the reasonability of maintaining state structures in the borders as we know them in Europe. Having that said, I do accept the strong criticism which has been formulated also by Reporters Without Borders in the context of the 2017 referendum concerning the measures which have been taken by the government of Spain against journalists. And I may recall you that we had some, as far as I remember, some 850 people who have been injured on the center of Madrid in demonstrations. At the same time, it is in Barcelona, the center of Barcelona. In the same time, the report of Reporters Without Borders say, and I'm quoting now, that auf der anderen Seite hat die katalonische Regionalregierung Druck auf einheimische und ausländische Journalisten ausgeübt, Auf den sozialen Netzwerken wurden Journalisten von den Hooligans einer separatistischen Bewegung eingeschüchtert. Dies betraf vor allem Journalisten, die nicht der separatistischen Linie folgten. In English, there is also a criticism of Reporter Without Borders on some elements of attacks against journalists who did not go with the intentions of the Catalan regional government. Coming to your question, yes, I do believe that the right-wing populist movements, not only in Europe, are in a massive conflict with the liberty of expression, the liberty of...
this is unfair when you say something in German that he does maybe not understand.
No, I'm happy to. I was translating what I was saying in German. The quotation which I did in... Okay. No, I didn't want to be unfair. I just wanted to be fair because I wanted to bring to the public the knowledge about both sides of the position of Reporter ohne Grenzen. This is my obligation to do, and it's not only my obligation. I'm deeply convinced that these issues have to be said and discussed. But I want to answer your question. I do believe that there is a challenge of the liberty of freedom, of the freedom of expression, which is under attack by the right-wing governments in Europe, but also in other countries. I want, and this is the last point, as a lawyer and as a person who has been leading a lot of cases successfully at the European Court on Human Rights about Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is the liberty of expression. I do know about the conflict of basis human rights between liberty of expression and protection of the security and the rule of law in countries. So it is a very important human right, Article 10 of the Convention, the right of free expression, but it has its limits in the legitimation under the Convention to protect interests of a state. And this is a conflict of human rights which is existing always, and judges have to analyze in the specific cases if the suspension of individual cases in human rights issues in liberty of expression are justified or not. And that's exactly the job which is to be done, in my view, not only in law, but also in politics. And last sentence, I do believe that there is no reason whatsoever not to accept free expression of the word, unless that this is not together with violence. So whatever is, if violence is part of the freedom of the expression, the state has the right, in my view, to interfere and to prohibit it. The simple formulation of needs, even to separate a state, a region from a state, in my view, is not legitimated to prohibit it. This is why expression freedom is here, in my personal view.
Thank you. I have a question to Yvonne. When you think about the political situation in Austria, the shift to the right, have there been repercussions for artists?
Short version or long version? No, I take the liberty to also start with two general observations. First, I think it is very important that we have space and time and attention to discuss this topic, in particular with regard to the freedom of artistic expression, because in the general discourse, my impression is there's a very strong tendency to downgrade the freedom of the arts as being less important, as being a luxury, something just for the few elites, but not to the bone of our democratic system and fabric. And the second observation is we are here in a gallery, in a place for art and exchange, and I think it's a pity that we have no artist with us here, a speaker, And because freedom of the arts is about silencing the artists and making unheard what their voices would be or could be. So I do hope that the artists present in the room take up later on maybe the mic and add their perspectives, because I'm not an artist myself. Coming to your question, 2 general observations. First, we do not have any data or any analysis on actual violations of the freedom of the arts in Austria, kind of facts and figures. This leads to the situation, which we all know very well, that we are talking about isolated, singular cases, seemingly. So, German, Einzelfälle. Because there is no systematic, like, kind of stock taking on monitoring, which is very problematic because Austria is one of the few blind spots when it comes to the freedom of the arts where this is not done. Second, yes, to your question, I do see shifts. Do I see the freedom of the arts as being attacked in Austria? No. I do think it's very well established, but we witness in our everyday work how, in particular, the far-right parties are trying to test the boundaries and moving the boundaries peu à peu, always more to what can be done and how repercussion can be, how the space can be limited. And I think this is very much related to a general development, not only to the artistic field, because we are not operating an isolated field, the arts. It's about shrinking spaces for civil societies, about verbal attacks by representatives of our governments when it comes to artists who critically raise their voices of, I would even call it NGO bashing. And this creates a climate, a real climate change, where more and more people feel it is legitimate and they are allowed to attack the arts, to destroy artworks, to disrupt artistic events, which we have seen. And this shift can be witnessed, I think, if we compare to a couple of years ago, that now it seems to be normal, which it is not. And I do miss the outrage, in particular, of the political representatives who just keep silent.
Thank you. I would ask Mamo, Mirzani. Currently, the Turkish army is conducting a major offensive against the Kurdish people in northern Syria. This is not the first time, and the Kurdish people are under attack. Can you give us an overview about the difficulties the Kurds face in Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say thank you to all the organizers for having me here. I'm not really that well prepared for this discussion, as I've been asked just a few hours ago to attend. But I'm happy to be here and to have the opportunity to speak up for the people in Turkey and in Kurdistan, which are going through a very tough time at the moment. The history of the Kurdish people in the countries where they live in Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Syria is full of pressure from the governments when it comes to rights of self-determination, freedom of speech, freedom of thoughts, and press freedom. I am a spokesperson here for the HDP, People's Democratic Party of Turkey, here in Austria. And we've been preparing to speak up and to organize various actions to get voice for the people of the Democratic Party in Turkey, which are jailed, same as for speaking up for Kurdish rights or for criticizing the Turkish president, for example. So in this respect, we have very much in common with the Catalan people. So the leaders of the People's Democratic Party. The co-leaders are in jail for about 3 years now, and another 7 parliamentarians are in jail, but as much as about 50,000 activists too. I've been speaking to people from Catalonia living in Austria a year ago about the referendum for independence in Catalonia and in Kurdistan, which have been in 2017, September 25th and 1st October in Catalonia. And there is a lot in common, the people in Catalonia and Kurdistan. The people Kurdish people in Iraq, for example, were not really, I mean, they could do the referendum, but immediately afterwards they've got threatened by all the neighbor countries, especially Turkey and Iran. So they came together to do military actions at the border, and they were threatening explicitly the 8 million people living in northern Iraq, southern Kurdistan, to invade or to cut off every kind of supply for the people there. And President Erdogan of Turkey was saying that they will have to hunger if they do this referendum or go further. So he will shut down the borders. At the moment, actually, we have, as well as in Catalonia and in Syrian Kurdistan, which is called Rojava, really a war from the Turkish invasion to northern Syria, Rojava. And at the same time, we are watching also the protests of Catalan people in Barcelona and other Catalonian cities. And I would like to express my full solidarity and the Kurdish people's solidarity to the Catalan people on the streets, which are asking for the same thing. Like the Kurdish people are asking for self-determination, and the Catalan people are also asking for self-determination. And one common fate we have together is that the Kurdish and the Catalan people were facing in the past, like the Catalan people from the Franco regime in Spain, and the Kurdish people in all these countries. They're living Saddam Hussein regime, now the Erdogan regime, the Ataturk regime, the Iranian mullah regime, and also the Assad regime, were putting pressure and killing and jailing people. But I would like to say the Kurdish people will not give up to fight for their rights for self-determination, and we are in solidarity with all the people on the streets and on the ballots and in arts, asking for freedom of speech and for self-determination. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The last one. Last on the podium is now Salvador Espada. You are a political activist from Spain. Is there a restriction of freedom of expression in your country? We've seen this because this exhibition has been censored.
The whole thing of Western democracy, we have to put it in its proper place. We are proud in Europe of having achieved and having overcome previous crises of democracy, but we never reached a true democracy in Europe. I was born with Franco alive in 1973. But then he died. And when I was young, democracy, luckily and by the fight of the people, came to Spain. But we did not have full democracy all these decades, and we still don't in Spain. I was active in environmental struggles in Spain. and we have had environmental struggles there that were defeated, and were defeated by violence and by media silencing. Like in the 90s, in the Gibraltar Strait, they built a cable for electricity, and there were a really, really heavy, violent action from the Spanish security rural police, Guardia Civil. For example, we had also high-speed trains that are being executed in a very corrupt manner, destroying territory. In my hometown, that was the case. There's a village that lost the water because of the breaking of an aquifer. They still have no water. They have no water. We do not have in Western world true democracy. We never had. When the economy gets threatened, mechanisms go in place. And we need to achieve economic democracy to have a true democracy. And for that, especially in the central areas of North, we need to support the struggles in the South. There are many people being killed for environmental struggles. And all the things that happen in the world, we need to be aware and we need to support. And I myself, from Podemos and from Unidas Podemos, I want to show solidarity also for every struggle and launch a call for fighting all these fights in a peaceful manner and to connect them all.
Gabriel, Lansky, you wanted to leave, or you have to leave. Do you want to make a final statement?
Thanks a lot for the opportunity, and please excuse me, I don't want to leave, but I have to leave. I was announcing this in advance. No, just want to say and to make the resume for me that that it is a very crucial element in the human rights policy in the framework of the Council of Europe, of the main where the main documents of human rights have been founded and implemented. That the liberty of expression has to be granted also for the formulation of ideas, as the court said many times, even if they are shocking or not acceptable for many people. So there is a very broad frame of liberty which has to be granted by the countries. And it is not acceptable if this pure position of a political position leads to measures which hinder journalists to do their work. So this is the principle, and this is the principle which is existential for the duty of Reporters Without Borders. Everything else is parallel to that, needed to be checked, and there are limits of this liberty, as I said before, but the court understands itself as a main guardian of this liberty, so they only very exceptionally would accept restrictions of this liberty. So, in my opinion, and it's probably not a mistake that if you go into statistics of the condemnation of nations by the European Court on Human Rights, and if you see the amount of condemnations by the court of different states, Turkey is, for instance, Turkey has 321 condemnations, ex 2018. Russia has 53, France 38, fourth place Austria with 35, and Poland 32. So you have a dramatic quantity of condemnations of Turkey in concerning violations of Article 10 of the Convention. And this is not by error, and I would bet that a relevant part of this statistic is due to measures against Kurdish people. So yes, I think there is a problem, and we need to be very vigilant about that. And obviously, as you can see on the statistics, the European culture and the Council of Europe's member states do not accept those violations, and the court reacts on that. This is why, generally speaking, in my view, as I said before, the borderline is just violence. So when this borderline has not been transpassed, I think there is no excuse for limitation of liberty of expression. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thank you for participating in this discussion, and we wish you a nice evening. Bye. Mr. Bosk, you had, I think, some interviews yesterday, and I wrote, I read the interview today in the Presse, Tageszeitung in Austrian, and after that I was not sure what could be a solution for the conflict between Catalonia and Spain. And as we're here in a gallery, and we have here this exhibition with Santiago Sierra, do you think that art and artists, critical artists, could support your program, or do you have, as the government of Catalonia, a program where critical artists or the art were supported to support the political issue?
Yes, can I make two previous remarks concerning the other
Sure.
colleagues' contributions? First of all, regarding comments about freedom of press in Catalonia, I was not aware of the complaints of Reporters Without Borders. I would love to talk with a lawyer, with a gentleman about this. But as you said, I've been having in this trip, which is a three-day trip in 4 countries, which is not bad. I've had something like 35 interviews. We have put no restriction to that, and I'm happy to having answered any questions which were posed, and but I would like to really find out what these complaints are about, because I was not aware of this. And regarding also the situation of Kurdistan, also let me tell you that next week my party, which is in the Catalan administration, but still my party feels very close to the grievances which you pointed out, and next week we will present an initiative in Parliament to ask for the same things in Kurdistan for which we are asking in Catalonia, and that's that the Turkish government initiate talks, that dialogue be a priority, and that a democratic solution, not by force, but through talks and through the vote, be found in the case of Kurdistan. Exactly the same we're demanding for the people of Catalonia and for any peoples in the world. We hope that is approved. That also depends on other parties. We are hopeful that that this will pass and that it will be approved. And regarding the question you were posing, well, yes, there's very important contributions which can be made by people who are creative, I think we live in a very creative society. It's the place where Dali and Miro and Picasso actually got their training and started with their creative job. It's the place also where Gaudi was born and did most of his work, especially in Barcelona. And we think such a creative society would gain a lot from artists' understanding or even support. We think that's happening already. We would encourage it to happen even more. But I would like to thank this gallery and you for holding this exhibition, for having the courage of exposing this series of photographs which have been banned in other places in Spain, like Arco, which you mentioned. And we think that that deserves all our credit and all our gratefulness. So thank you for being brave. We know it hasn't been easy. We know that your task is never easy with all the causes that you defend, and particularly, but most of all, the cause of free expression, free creation, and free communication. Thank you for that.
Yvonne, what do you think? Can art improve or support political agendas, or is that should artists not support political agendas?
I think artists should be allowed and in the position to do whatever they want. This can be political, but it doesn't have to be political. That's part of the freedom of the arts. But a little bit relating to your question to Bosch, I prepared myself for this discussion, and I think it's fitting very well because I was looking up what we do know about the status of the freedom of the arts within Europe. So it's just the European Union, and there is a globally active NGO called Freemius, which publish an annual report on documented cases of violations. And for 2017, we have more than 100 cases of attacks on artists recorded in Europe, with 17 artists put in prison and 12 artists being prosecuted. Now, as this exhibition is called also censorship, 50% of these violations were censorship. And who did the censorship? In 2 out of 3 cases, it was the state, it was the government. So it was not right-wing extremist groups, religious groups, or private companies. It is still the government who is violating the freedom of the arts. And in which countries? And here it's getting very interested. According to Freemius, the top 5 countries in the EU, when it comes to documented cases of violations of artistic freedoms, were number 1, Spain. Number 2, France. Number 3, United Kingdom. Number 4, Germany. And number 5, Poland. With France being also among the top 10 countries worldwide and found to have censored the most, and Spain being the top country found to have violated in particular freedom of the musical expressions. But of course, be careful looking at this data, because this is just what has been recorded, what has been documented, so it's the tip of the iceberg, and as somebody once put it, the nature of censorship is such that it is censored information.
Thank you. As we're here in the gallery and in the art scene, I have a question to you, Mamo. We have here an artwork of a Kurdish artist which has to live in Switzerland, is there still art in the area where the Kurdish people are living? Is art possible under these circumstances when you're under pressure with war? And can the artists there support the political agenda of freedom?
Yes, of course there is. I mean, arts never can be really regulated by governments that much that it stops somewhere. The work from Mirkan reminds me of a Kurdish woman, an artist. Her name is Zehra Doğan. She was jailed in Turkey for about 3 years. She's free now. And she was jailed just for painting a picture of a city in southeastern Turkey, in Kurdistan, where the Turkish army has just bombed and destroyed the whole city of Nusaybin. And she has just printed the picture of a photo she got from the press, and just for doing that she was jailed for 3 years. And so it's possible. What did Zehra do, for example? While she was in jail, she was continuing her work, and she did it with the material she had in jail. And she used her own blood, she used colors she produced herself from vegetables or whatever she found. And this was exhibited in Tate Gallery, for example, in London. And when it comes to solidarity with artists under pressure in jail, it reminds me of the famous graffiti artist Banksy, for example. Banksy has shown solidarity with Zehra Doğan, the Kurdish artist. While she was in jail, he painted a whole big wall in New York City, in Manhattan, showing solidarity with Zehra Doğan. And after this, to show you the importance of solidarity with such people, after this, suddenly the Turkish government and the Justice Ministry started to work on her file, and she got freed earlier because there was so much pressure through the world's most famous, one of the world's most famous artists, Banksy, and the whole world, and it was in all the news that Turkey is jailing women just for painting a picture of a fact given in the civil war between Kurdish people and the Turkish army. So therefore, I think it's very important to go ahead with that kind of solidarity between artists, but also that journalists and activists and common people like us are trying to speak. They should speak up for these people and buy their art, support them, and write about it and talk to people about it. That's very important.
Thank you. Salvador, Santiago Sierra is a Spanish artist who supports the political independent fight from Catalonia and is censored by the Spanish authorities. What do you think about?
We oppose all forms of censorship. We denounce the situation concerning the musicians that she was pointing. It's very painful for us that people are censored by town governments. They are forbade to sing in villages. So there's a deterioration of the freedom of expression going on. People see more and more as something normal. When in the Spanish transition, in the time after the death of Franco, this was also the case. There were an outbreak of freedom of expression and artist provocations, and this was also repressed. But in that time, this was opening the windows. Now we see that the cultural war is happening, and we are getting more and more oppressed on our minds. And from Podemos, we give a clear voice to denounce any kind of censorship, and we support the artists and the musicians despite how nasty can their products be.
Okay, before you can ask questions to the podium, I wanted to ask you, Mr. Bosch, the political situation in Catalonia is now, I think, very difficult. There's violence on the street. What do you think could be a solution how to come out of this situation? In Austria, we have the political thing that is called make a compromise, talk with one another. Is this a thing which is a possibility to solve this conflict in your region?
Well, yes, naturally, that's the best road, and we think it's the only really relevant path we can take. We have to talk, and we've been saying that to the Spanish government. We've been asking them to talk before the referendum was held 2 years ago, during the vote itself, after the vote, and even now when we see our colleagues suffering, their families suffering. This gentleman here, which I showed, is 50 years of age. He has 2 kids, which are 3 and 6, and possibly he won't be able to embrace them in freedom until they turn of age and they're man and a woman. So that's extremely sad. We obviously reject that, and we're asking for their freedom. We think it's unfair. But despite all this suffering, and despite the rulings of the Supreme Court, we still maintain that there's only one way to fix this, which is talking. So we're asking the Spanish government still now, and we will ask it always, to sit and talk. They have to sit and talk to us. The problem right now is that we're waiting, we're sitting at the table, we're stretching out our hand, but right opposite us there's nobody, there's an empty chair. Because the Spanish government says there's nothing to talk about. And they refuse the idea of dialogue, which is crazy. Because that doesn't help, that makes things worse. And right now, as you said, we're seeing what the result of not talking to each other ends up with. And let me say another thing. I believe that the best way, and the only way probably, of calming down spirits on each side is that people can see that politicians are able to talk to each other. Just that image. The perception that your leaders are up to the job and they're not engaging in constant confrontation, but that they're able to engage in dialogue. I think that single image by itself can cool down spirits. So that's what we need urgently right now, and we're asking for that. Once we start talking, well, we have a proposal, we have a plan, we have our ideas. I'm sure the Spanish government has different ideas, but they'll be most welcome to present their own proposal. We haven't heard of that. We don't know what they want. Yes, I think it's not only necessary and urgent, I think that's the only way out we have. And we are also willing to talk without conditions, except for one, which is keeping universal values. Universal values, very basic, very fundamental values, like civil rights, human rights, and democracy. I think nobody can surrender on that. And we cannot retreat on those basic, crucial values in our society. Those are the values on which Europe was founded out of its ashes, when it came out of a huge catastrophe, two huge catastrophes like the world wars. And the founding fathers in those times thought that the best way to preserve this new Europe which was being born was through peace, through dialogue, through democracy and human rights. We think, in that sense, European values are precious to us, and we have to cultivate them, we have to promote them, and we want to do it the European way. Europe needs it, Europe itself, because, as the colleague from Podemos said, there are also very important deficits all across Europe. We need to solve that. We need to overcome it and go back to the essentials, to the essence of this Europe, which we want to be free and the fair, if we can, the most free and the most fair of the regions in the world. That's our job, and that's what we want to do.
Thank you very much. Is someone in the audience who wants to ask questions to the people on the podium, please?
The title of this conference was related to the trend in Europe, asking, I think, if I remember well, what is the direction where Europe is going to? Is there a trend to more democracy, or is there a trend to a kind of personalization? Because I see more and more influence and more development of ultra-right parties in different countries of Europe. So I would like to make the question of if there is this trend, why do politicians not stop this? For example, by making searching for more transparency of the way how these parties are financed. For example, I know that they are not interested in transparency maybe for themselves, but are they not seeing that if there is not more transparency of the way how they are being financed, is causing that ultra-right parties are becoming more and more stronger? Why I don't see that the democracy is reacting towards these emerging ultra-right parties in Europe, and I think that also in other countries outside of Europe, like Brazil, for example.
Who wants to answer this question? It's a political question, not an art question. Yeah.
It has a repercussion on us if these parties come out.
Sure, yeah.
In Europe, we devastated the world from Europe. But before devastating the world, we devastated ourselves first. Like I recently knew this artistic period of Austria. I don't remember the name now. Yeah, people was.
You can say it in German.
People was staying in houses because they were police state and the monarchy was so brutal. And then the paintings are only. What was the name of the art? Well, political parties. Can you attend an assembly of a political party? Can you participate in your neighborhood in the decision making in a certain political party? Can you go to the assembly of the Greens in the 2nd district? Like we ourselves in Podemos, Austria, our assemblies are open. Everybody is welcome to come. Does Social Democrat Party do that in Austria or in Spain? Like when we are deciding that Greece, Cyprus, in the summer of 2015, that they cannot ignore the memorandum, and when 26 of 27 members of the government cornered Varoufakis and Dijsselbloem, which is social democrat from Holland, from Netherlands. Is this accessible for us, for the people? We are completely disconnected from the parties. The parties are not what they are supposed to be. They should have open assemblies. They don't. Why don't they show the money? They don't show the money because the story behind is very ugly. And are we heading to a more democracy thing? There are wills and there are movements, there are young people pushing for that, and people of every age. Are we getting there? We have both trends. We have a trend to go more ugly. We have a trend to achieve what would be better. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. First of all, I would like to thank all the speakers for your reflections. Before my question, I would like to make a small concern. I'm a Catalan digital activist. I consider myself a Catalan digital activist. And it's interesting because we have been pointing out some points about political prisoners, freedom of expression. But I think that also one important point here to remark is freedom of information. We have seen this year, and I think this has been very underestimated by politicians, but also by the press. And it's a bit related with the question before about, we have been talking about Austria, Catalonia, Kurdistan, but in a European framework, we've seen how the right-wing parties have been passed laws like the copyright law, Article 11, Article 13, which are threatening the information, the share of the information in Europe. And I think this is very related with what we are seeing here. This information, if we are not able to distribute this information, then we are kind of restricting even more artistical freedom of expression, restricting even more injustices like the one in Kurdistan and Catalonia. So I would like, for me, it's very flagrant to see how this European framework is contributing actually, not in separate countries, but in total, to this restriction. We haven't seen yet the results, but soon we will see how this distribution of information due to extreme copyright imposed will affect our ability to share information with people around. So my question is how do you think that this further restriction of share of information will affect political agendas, how will affect artistical expression, and they will affect the distribution of social causes and injustices in general?
Should we gather some questions? Yes. Romana.
I would like maybe refer to this freedom of expression for art. For me, freedom of expression for art is basic, right? But my artwork is maybe something else. It is with my artwork, I try to involve in the process that a society makes clear or communicates how people want to live together. So I conceptualize my artwork as a contribution to the process of publicity. And if we now have this development that right-wing politicians or right-wing activists give more and more pressure on artists and on artworks, then I think it would be very important that we all together think which structures we can build up to support people who get under this pressure, not only artists of course, especially when they come from minorized groups. Because, and this also relates with what happens with this art project that I did together with Maier-Gamauf. It happened that sub-chairman of the Partei Österreich dismantled his artwork and made a video piece and put this on Facebook, where he said, I am an artist and I'm an activist, and now I do an artwork and I dismantled this other artwork. And so what I want to make clear is that, especially for people from minorized groups, which to become visible as an artist or also as a person under oppression is on one hand important to like fight for your own rights, and on the other hand it's also very dangerous. And I would be very happy if we like put together think of what structures we could build up or build up more, as we are all working a lot to build up structures and to support people and to maybe react quickly to those things. Like, for example, this exhibition, of course, was a really important support for us, which I also wanted to say, and we are very thankful for that, because it was like people who say, okay, we support this project, and this was very important for us, but the point is exhibitions need long time to be organized or some time, and it would be very important to like react quick in these situations. And before I finish, I would like to add one detail, even if it's a very difficult situation, but you said that the artists refused to talk on the podium because of English, and I'm so thankful for this exhibition, but I was asked today on the telephone, and then I said, I'm very sorry, but I had the impression that now, out of the situation of being the second choice, I should sit on the podium without getting the chance to prepare, and also if it is in English, and that was the reason why I refused. I would never have refused to participate in this discussion, because I've been fighting for the right for artists to talk about their artworks for like 20 years or so.
I must say I'm sitting here without... I'm sitting here without having the chance to prepare as a moderator, because Mr. Staudinger called me, I think it was 5 or 5:30, and said he will not come. But it was not easy for Luis, this is the guy right of Romana, to prepare this podium, because we ask a lot of people and how should it fit together, more politicians, more artists. The idea was to have more artists. At the end of the day, it's now how we are sitting here. But I think it's okay. And does someone want to answer to the statement of the man in the second row?
Okay, I'll do it then. Yes. I think the question was about how far it will go, the governments and the different justice ministries in Europe try to silence artists and activists on the internet, right?
Well, in general, it's like some laws are being passed by European institutions, not just countries, European institutions that represent the whole society, supposedly, regarding freedom of information, which I think is like also probably the highest layer that includes artistical expression and also like freedom of expression. So I think the concept of freedom of information covers everything, and it's being threatened now. And how do you think this might affect the lower layers, and especially in your specific cases?
Okay, thank you. I know about that law, and yeah, the European institutions are made of European governments and parties, which are having effect on these laws, and we are giving our vote to these parties, and they're supposed to represent us there. But we have to keep in mind that. Even if we vote for parties and they are in parliaments or in the EU Parliament, there are still different type of things which are affecting these people when they are deciding something. Yeah, it is the market capital, and they're trying to keep their interests as well. And often it's the case that it's not the people's interest that they are working there for, but it's for their free markets and for finance industries and other type of industries. What we can do is to put pressure on those people and parties and organizations we are supporting or we are giving our vote to. But more important than that is to keep on struggling in digital media and in media on the streets and however it's possible within the laws in the countries we live. And we see more and more often that governments are trying to have impact on the laws of other countries, governments, and for example, it's no surprise that one of the countries which is supporting Turkey's invasion in northern Syria and Russia is Spain, and it's Hungary. These are the only two EU membership countries which have expressed more or less openly that they are supporting this invasion. And countries like Germany, which is one of the best business partners of the Turkish regime, is trying to criminalize activists and especially Kurdish people within Germany in order to keep them to suppress their voice and keep pressure on them not to be that active, not only on the streets but also on social media. So, for example, when you're posting a news article on Facebook in Lower Germany, in Bayern, Bavaria, you can go for jail for this, or you have to pay a lot of money if you're just posting an article of a German state-owned media, just showing up the flags of these Kurdish self-defense forces of the women and the people there, YPG and YPJ. And this goes on, and I just read an article in that specific state-owned media, Bayern Rundfunk, that the Justice Ministry in Bavaria is planning to prohibit to have a yellow profile picture on social media. Yellow like the yellow of Catalanians, and just because Kurdish people are trying to show color in support of the people in Rojava, northern Syria. And this is for sure not that what people which have voted for the Conservative Party in People's Party in Germany, Lower Germany, for the CSU, but they're still doing it because they have a lot of business going on with the Turkish regime, and they don't want to stop that, and they want to keep their might, and maybe that might is possible, and they're trying to influence us. But what we can do is to not to give up and be still active and be aware of where my vote is going and which party I'm voting for and what media I'm consuming and what I'm following. There is always a way to get the information the governments and other organizations are trying to keep you away from.
Okay. Can I make a question? Or do you want to reply? Sorry. Okay, make your question when Yvonne replies.
Self-censorship, because I think there's a lot of pressure from the media and a lot of pressure from politics, and as soon as especially artists are like crossing the red line, they get in the focus of certain people and they get really badly attacked. And that's something that's concerning, because I think a lot of people is just like shutting up because they know that there will be a reaction towards their work, their artworks. And I think that's really concerning, because I think there's, of course, these cases of real censorship, but a lot of cases that are just not happening because people, in fact, are leaving these works in their studios. And you can see it with Romana. I mean, it's not like they wanted this to make this provocation, but they get attacked. And a lot of people, and a lot of artists in this example of Stephanie Sargnagel. She's all the time in the media. A lot of content is not nice for some people here, what she's saying, but I think, and that's like the end of my intervention, I think that there has to be solidarity between people, and you don't have to be, the problem is with solidarity in this case is that people offer, sometimes they make a difference between, they say, for example, I'm not in favor of this content, so I'm against it, but you don't have to be in favor of the content. You have to be in favor of having the right to express this meaning, these statements. And I think this is really important, and I think we should all practice more solidarity for artists, for other minorities, doesn't matter.
Okay. And I think that's the right handing over to Yvonne.
Thank you. I'm trying to connect the dots and find a positive perspective, which is not easy to do. But I would like to invite everybody who is interested to join the network. It's an informal network of artists, cultural practitioners, art institutions, and everybody active in this field, be it as a professional, be it as an amateur, be it as an activist, called Die Vielen, which is not only active in Austria, but also in Germany and other countries, and raising their voices and trying without any resources, except dedication and free time, which means unpaid time, time you don't have for your family, but being out there and really pinpointing if there are threats to the artistic freedoms, which is not always such obvious. As you just said, Lius, we know that in particular the attacks on social media against women artists have increased tremendously. And the other point is, it's not positive, but it gives a way. European Union and the question where we're going or maybe going, I don't have the glass ball, I can tell you. But I think we're at a crossroads right now. And we will have a new European Commission, and we already know the plans, how this European Commission should look like. And if we look at it, we see where the priorities are. And my personal view is you always see it if you follow the money. Which means, from the cultural perspective, there will be no EU commissioner responsible from the portfolio, which means the areas, for culture anymore. It's under the headline innovation. And we all know what innovation usually means, and it's confirmed if you look into the details. It means creative industries, having startups, making money. And even more important or more worrying is that there will be an EU commissioner with the title Protecting the European Way of Life. Which means, if you look into it, migration policy and border policy. That's our European way of life. Building walls and protecting the walls. And there is an initiative, not only in Austria, but we try to make our voices heard, to strongly protest against this way which is proposed where the European Union should go, because we think it's fatal if we don't think about the core values, if we think about the cultural diversity, the freedom of the arts, the values which constituted the European Union and gave us such a long time of freedom, but not equality, and not equality when it comes especially to social and economic rights. So please join this protest.
Salvador, you have made a lot of notices. Do you want to say something? You have a microphone.
Just to share a memory, 2011, 8 years ago, we made a big demonstration on the 15th of October here in Vienna, and Austrian artist painting a super beautiful banner with a planet Earth and global revolution with the love thing. And one thing artists do well is banners for demonstrations.
Okay, it's already late. I would finalize with a last question to the guest from Barcelona. Do you think, or does the Spanish people support the position of the Spanish government, and does the Spanish media support this position against the independence of Catalonia?
Well, it depends on which Spanish people you're talking about. Of course, it's a plural society. Let me say something which I think is important. There's no hatred in Catalonia against Spain. And it's remarkable that that is absent. We're not haters. We have relatives who live in Spain. We speak Spanish, all of us, and we're very proud of that. So I think that there's no real problem of social harmony between peoples and between societies. We have a problem with powers of the state, with the establishment. And I think that distinction is very important. So when you come to the people, there's, according to polls, there's around 40% of the Spanish population which would support self-determination for Catalonia. Not necessarily independence, but self-determination. That's the capacity to decide and to vote about the future. But then when you go into politics, or when you go into the media, that becomes a much smaller minority. So the establishment, like happens in so many other cases, apparently is not responding to the real pattern which you see in Spanish society. The only political party in the Kingdom of Spain which is responsive to that and which is behind self-determination is Podemos. So I'm so happy to share the views here of somebody from this political movement, because we think we share such fundamental values that it's this party and the people who represent it are very valuable people, are people who in actual fact could represent a much larger portion of Spanish society than the votes they actually get. I'm sure of that. And we were very hopeful in that regard. We think that if Spanish society is increasingly modern and increasingly free and increasingly open, finally, that will also get to politics and to the media. And regarding the media, it's a very strange, a very strange pattern where you get like the main Spanish media, of course, connected to the establishment, saying completely different things to what most of the Catalan media say. And you look at information from both sides, and the impression you get is that they live in different worlds and they're talking about different places. So they're fortunately enough, like a gentleman here was pointing out, we have the social media and the social networks. And we also have something which is tremendously important for us, which are the international media. Whatever is being published here in Austria, believe it or not, really interests us and really affects our possibilities and opportunities. Why? Because we regard them as much more, of course media everywhere have trends and positions, but we regard them as much more neutral, at least when they consider our case or our issue. So, so fortunately we can balance such a biased situation. And yes, I we also rely on the free opinion and the freedom of action of the world of culture and the arts. Please don't stop expressing yourselves freely and being brave like you are being here in this gallery. Do I have to remember that some of the greatest works of art came from freedom and political criticism? The painting Guernica, made by Picasso, was a frontal and sharp criticism to the brutality of fascism and Nazism. And it's a great work of art. The fact that there's ideas behind it, even political ideas, doesn't mean that the work of art loses value. Sometimes it's exactly the opposite. So yes, let's encourage free people in a free world to be outspoken and to help the world at large be a much better place. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this was a very good final statement. I thank you very much for attending our discussion, for visiting our gallery, and I hope I see you on next Wednesday when we have our next vernissage. Thank you and a good evening.